Can't believe we're meeting here of all places. To think someone like you, a loser, could make it to Italy. Without a care for my distress, Ralla, a former friend, sneered disgustingly. Beside Ralla stood Jim, a doctor, and my former fiancé. I had lost Jim, once my lover, to Ralla. Who's this guy? Where did you pick up this poor soul? How many decades of savings did you spend to get here? After looking down on me, they turned their attention to my husband next to me. Hey, know your place, poor man. Where do you work? Jim said, patting my husband's shoulder arrogantly. Ralla and Jim, having had their fun at our expense, soon found their smiles vanishing with my husband's next words. Don't you realize who I am? What followed was a literal hell for the two of them. My name is Nancy, 48 years old. I work as a nurse in a general hospital. Having graduated from a vocational school, I've moved between hospitals but always worked as a nurse. Since childhood, I was timid and even afraid of the sight of blood, but I fell seriously ill in middle school. I vividly remember thinking I was going to die. It was such a severe illness. Crushed by anxiety, I was greatly encouraged by the nurses at the hospital where I was admitted. If I said I was too scared to sleep, they would sit by my side until I could, keeping me company. On the day of my surgery, "It's going to be okay," they reassured me over and over. Their dedicated care helped me overcome my illness. This experience significantly changed the future of a timid person like me. The thought of giving back the life I was saved inspired me to pursue a career in nursing. I've been all about work for a long time, but now I live with my husband Ben, whom I married 8 years ago. He is 5 years older than me, a reliable and dependable person. By the year we got married, I was over 40 and had given up on having children. When proposed to, I confessed this feeling honestly. Then, "As long as I can live with Nancy, that's all I need." He embraced me. That's how we came to be a working couple, living freely together. I met my husband about 2 years before we got married, and it had been about 10 years since I last dated. I always had the desire to marry from when I was young. However, there's a reason I stayed away from romance for so long. It might be a common reason, but I was deeply hurt in my younger days. Betrayed by someone I trusted, I decided I didn't want to experience that kind of pain again. To tell this story, we have to go back about 20 years. Back then, in my 20s, I was working as a nurse at a different hospital. It was there I fell in love with Jim, a surgeon. Jim was a good-looking young man with distinct features, popular among female patients and nurses alike. Despite hearing some not-so-great rumors about his relationships, my younger self didn't care about any of that. Being timid and having never dated anyone before, I was surprisingly proactive this time. Since I was assigned to surgery, I had many chances to talk to Jim and desperately tried to make an impression. We went out for meals with colleagues a few times, and gradually, Jim and I became closer. It seems Jim didn't harbor any bad feelings towards me, who had admired him for a long time. Eventually, Jim asked me out, and our love blossomed. Ralla, a friend from my vocational school days who also worked at the same hospital, was surprised by this fact. Ralla, working in internal medicine, couldn't believe I was dating Jim, whose popularity spanned the entire hospital. Nevertheless, Ralla was overjoyed for me, as if it were her own happiness. Ralla was the exact opposite of me. While I was plain and timid, she had always been stylish and a leader since our school days. Despite our differences, we became close because our seats were near each other. Ralla seemed a bit intimidating at first, but she was actually bright, straightforward, and pleasant to be around. She often helped me out in times of trouble, and eventually, we became what you could call best friends. Then, we both ended up working at this hospital, which accepted many students for practical training. Even though we were in different departments, our relationship continued as before. 2 years into my relationship with Jim, marriage naturally came up in conversation. Still in my 20s, I thought it ideal to marry early, have children, and support Jim as a doctor's wife. Jim formally proposed, and we got engaged. It seemed Jim too wished for me to be a stay-at-home wife. He talked about wanting children and passing on his legacy. Our relationship was known not just in the surgery department, but throughout most of the hospital. I remember the female nurses seemed disappointed that Jim was finally getting married. With the engagement settled, I thought it natural to have a family meeting, so I suggested a dinner with both our parents. However, Jim was hesitant to accept this idea. "It's important, I know, but you're aware of how busy I am, right? It's hard to match schedules with my parents." Every time I asked about his parents' availability, he would dodge the question. Working closely with Jim, I was aware of his busy schedule, so although I found it somewhat odd, I believed him. This situation continued for over 6 months, and even my parents, who knew we were engaged, started to worry. "Why hasn't he come to meet us yet?" my father angrily questioned. My own anxiety grew by the day, and I found myself distracted at work. With a job that involves people's lives, I couldn't let this continue. I told Jim about my parents' worries. Then, Jim answered with a look of annoyance. Marriage, you're so nagging about it." "I've changed my mind, the engagement is off." Jim said this without changing his expression, as if discarding the thought. "What? What are you talking about? You're joking, right?" I called out desperately to Jim as he was about to leave, but he never spoke another word. The subtle distance between Jim and me over the past few months seemed obvious to those around us. News of my breakup with Jim spread quickly throughout the hospital. Nurses in the same department didn't say anything directly to me, but various rumors started circulating. Some said I was too eager to marry, or that my jealousy was too strong and I had tried to control Jim. All were common, fabricated stories, but one in particular was hard to ignore. It was rumored that Jim had a new lover. Of course, no colleague would discuss such things in front of me, so I decided to ask directly. "I know there are all sorts of rumors, but where did you hear that the doctor has a new lover?" My unexpected, pointed question made the air tense. "Sorry, I didn't mean to tease. There are various stories about Dr. Jim because he's involved in many things." They continued, looking apologetic. "I don't know if it's true, and I wasn't going to tell you, but..." The colleague seemed unsure whether to continue. I pressed for more details from my hesitant colleague. "It's just a rumor, but someone said they saw Dr. Jim getting close with Rolla from internal medicine." At the mention of Rolla's name, my mind momentarily froze. "Rolla. You're good friends with Rolla, right? That's why the story has blown up even more." My colleague sighed heavily, looking at me. "I shouldn't say this now, but it's better to stay away from Jim. If this story is true, Rolla is going to end up in a worse situation." Hearing this from my colleague made my mood sink even further. If this story was true, it meant I was betrayed by my best friend. Betrayed by both my lover and my best friend, I would lose them both. Thinking about it made me not want to confront Rolla directly. But looking back, I realized I hadn't talked much with Rolla in these past few months. Once doubt started, my anxiety overflowed, growing more and more. I decided to invite Rolla for a meal after work, resolving to face whatever came. Meeting Rolla after a long time, she seemed insincere, overly surprised to hear about my breakup with Jim. "You broke up? That's too bad, especially after getting engaged." The Rala I knew before would have been more empathetic when I was sad. But the Rala in front of me didn't seem sad at all. Instead, I could see an undeniable joy hidden in her eyes. I shouldn't be saying this to Rala, but... As I talked, I became convinced I needed to ask Rala directly. Do you know the rumor about you dating Jim? I asked hesitantly, to which Rala responded without changing her expression. Eh? Yeah, I know. It's true. Stunned, I was left speechless by the matter-of-factly delivered fact. Rala continued while picking at the food laid out on the table. I thought you had realized by now. To think you weren't sure until you asked me. Rala continued as if she hadn't done anything wrong. I've been involved with Jim for quite a while now. To put it bluntly, you were dumped. Rala glared at me as she tilted her glass of wine. Are we done here? Our friendship ends with this. Saying that, Rala left $100 on the table and stood up. I couldn't move from my spot for a while after Rala left. I had a bad feeling but never believed it would become reality. Betrayed by a friend I was so close to, I couldn't even cry anymore. Soon after, I resigned from the hospital. Betrayed by someone I trusted, I continued to distract myself by working hard. Time passed, and before I knew it, I was nearing 40 when I started dating my current husband, Ben. Knowing my past and understanding my inability to trust men, Ben took his time to heal my wounds one by one, initially as a friend. That's how I eventually married him. Our marriage has been peaceful, and our relationship remains strong. Though I work, my husband has an even busier schedule. One day, he had to go to Italy for work. It was his first business trip abroad, and I was full of questions, driven by curiosity. If you're so interested, why don't we make a trip out of it and go together? I couldn't immediately be happy about my husband's unexpected suggestion. But you're going for work. My husband laughed and responded. Our company is flexible about these things. It's okay. We can sightsee in between my work. Hesitant, I was, but my husband went ahead and planned our trip to Italy as a couple. Despite the invitation, I felt audacious for tagging along on my husband's work trip. Upon arriving in Italy, my timid nature took over, and I regretted my decision. Sensing this, my husband reassured me multiple times that it was okay. For safety, I was to stay in the hotel while he worked. The hotel was luxurious, like something out of a movie, complete with an indoor pool. There were even shops within the hotel, ensuring I wouldn't get bored while waiting. I spent my time enjoying sweets and tea at the cafe, reading. Tomorrow, I don't have work. Shall we go sightseeing? My husband suggested when he returned to the hotel. But aren't you tired from working all day? I expressed concern for his well-being, but he assured me with a smile that he was fine. Grateful for his kindness, we decided to go sightseeing together the next day. It was my first time abroad, and I was overwhelmed by the sights of Rome. The beautiful streets, the famous landmarks I had seen on TV and in books. Walking through the city with my husband was a blissful moment. As we were heading back to the hotel after finishing our pasta, someone unexpectedly called out to me. Nancy? The voice from a distant memory made my body freeze. Despite hoping it was a lie, I couldn't forget that voice. Turning around apprehensively, there stood Jim, my former fiancé, and Rala. Both had aged, but seeing them instantly brought back the nightmare vividly. Rala, holding luxury accessories and a bag, looked at me with the same cold eyes as the last time we spoke. Jim, adorned in tasteless jewelry, looked down on me with evident disdain. We got married after all that. I'm working at a big hospital now, busier than ever before. Before I knew it, my hands started trembling. Nancy, what's wrong? Are you okay? My past traumas resurfaced, leaving me almost in a panic. To think we'd meet here. That a loser like you could afford to come to Italy. Rolla said this with a sneer, uncaring as I held my head in distress. And who's this? Which poor soul did you catch? How many years of savings did you spend to get here? Watching the two, my husband seemed to realize that these were the people who had hurt me in the past. How much more do you need to hurt her before you're satisfied? Leave her alone. My usually gentle husband raised his voice for me. Eh? She's the one who got too serious and annoyingly clingy. Poor people should just stay quiet. Jim said this and arrogantly patted my husband's shoulder. Hey! Don't be rude. I'm a doctor. You can't even imagine, but I can spend hospital money however I want. Know your place. Amidst a crowd of tourists, Jim was practically frothing at the mouth. Enough. I don't want people like you insulting my husband. My timid self shouted as loud as I could, surprising Jim and Rolla. They seemed taken aback for a moment, but then looked at each other and laughed. What are you saying? If you don't want to be made fun of, just disappear. Rolla muttered while laughing. Do you enjoy belittling people? Rolla, didn't you realize you were being played too? My words twisted Rolla's face. It was a painful truth she didn't want to face, aware of it herself. What are you talking about, loser? Rolla screamed as if losing control, ready to lunge at me. Then, my husband stepped between me and Rolla. Don't come any closer to my wife. Rolla's movements halted under the imposing presence of my husband, who was close at hand. Having calmed down, Rolla then backed away. What's the matter with you? How dare you losers have an opinion about us? Rolla, face flushed with anger, started yelling. The sight of adults screaming in public was embarrassing for those watching. Jim joined in, escalating the situation into a small commotion. Some tourists even started filming the scene with their mobile phones. I wondered if this would spread online. A concern given my profession. Seeing the commotion, my husband stepped forward as if he had made up his mind, confronting Rolla and Jim. Don't you realize who I am? Standing before the two, my husband sighed and then spoke. Eh? Both were startled by my husband's words. Think you can use the hospital's money as you please? That poor people don't matter? Do you not even know the face of the hospital director you work for? Jim's face paled as he grasped my husband's identity. Though he couldn't believe that what he feared was actually happening. After all, we were in Italy. No way! Jim's visible distress also began to worry Rolla, who had never seen Jim, always so arrogant and confident, look so defeated. Embarrassing his wife with such a pathetic display seemed irrelevant now. Jim could only desperately hope he was wrong. Let me introduce myself. My name is Ben. As my husband revealed his name, Jim sat down, resigned. It can't be. This is Italy. Why would the director be here? Rolla, realizing the situation, looked back and forth between me and my husband. Yes, my husband is the director of a major hospital. And Jim, unaware, had been working at my husband's hospital. I was shocked when I casually read my husband's hospital pamphlet and saw Jim's name. Unable to hide my shock, I honestly shared my past with Jim. After learning about my and Jim's past, my husband considered firing Jim. However, Jim's skills as a doctor were undeniable, and personal issues alone couldn't justify his dismissal. Firing Jim for my personal reasons would compromise my husband's position. I calmed my angry husband, and Jim was not fired. I didn't know you were so foolish. To embezzle hospital funds, have some shame. Once we return to America, I'll take you to the police. Jim, by exposing his wrongdoing, had sealed his fate to lose his job. Facing criminal charges back in America, he was visibly set to lose everything. Rolla, witnessing this exchange, scolded Jim. You didn't even know the director of your own hospital? What will you do now? Who was it that said everything would stay hidden? It seemed Rolla was aware of Jim's financial misconduct. Knowing this, she had indulged in a lavish lifestyle. With Jim's self-exposure, Rolla's way of life could no longer continue as before. More than worrying about her husband, Rolla seemed concerned about the impact on her lifestyle. The love between two people built on deception was, after all, just as it appeared. Watching Rolla continue to berate Jim, I felt terribly uncomfortable. I remembered what a colleague had said when rumors about Jim and Rolla first surfaced. Rolla will end up in a worse situation. The person berating her own husband was no longer the Rolla who had been my close friend. After scolding Jim, who was unable to recover from the shock, Rolla looked at us and clicked her tongue. My life's a mess because of you too. Understand? She blamed us as if she had done nothing wrong. Speaking of which, Rolla works at Mike's hospital, right? I recalled hearing from a colleague that Rolla had moved to another hospital after leaving the one where she and Jim had worked. I couldn't just stand there and take her accusations. What? Why do you know that? Sensing the unfavorable turn of events, Rolla looked uneasy. Shouldn't we let Mike know about this? I asked my husband with feigned naivety. Yes, we should. If she knew about Jim's misconduct, it's only right to inform Mike. Mike is a hospital director and a college friend of my husband's with whom he still keeps in touch. Ironically, Jim and Rolla both ended up working within my reach. Are you threatening me? Rolla, aware of her complicity in wrongdoing, approached us with a flushed face. Threaten? We want nothing from you. It's just that Mike, a friend of my husband, should know. Besides, once Jim is arrested, it'll come out anyway, so it's the same whether we say it or not. I couldn't help but add a touch of sarcasm in my response to Rolla. Hearing this, Rolla finally gave up and sat down beside Jim. Amidst the crowd of tourists, the sight of the two sitting and crying attracted even more attention. Let's go. We shouldn't waste our trip on this. My husband said this as he looked at the two weeping figures. After a few more days of sightseeing in Italy, we returned home. My husband, considerate of me, took me to various tourist attractions. The main reason for my husband's trip to Italy was to attend a seminar by a prestigious Italian doctor. He seemed satisfied with what he had learned at the seminar and its implications for his work. I wondered if Jim and Rolla might flee the country to escape criminal charges, but they didn't have the courage. Upon our return, Jim was immediately fired from the hospital as my husband had declared. A detailed investigation into the funds he had embezzled for research and equipment purchases exposed all his misdeeds. As a result, Jim faced criminal charges and was sentenced to prison. Rolla, needless to say, also lost her job. After my husband spoke to Mike, the hospital director, we learned that Rolla's reputation was quite poor. She had been boastful about her surgeon husband and often lorded it over her colleagues. The Rolla I knew was a woman who worked diligently with her patients' best interests at heart, but her reputation among patients was also terrible. Unbeknownst to me, Rolla seemed to have changed drastically over time. Though not as severely punished as Jim, Rolla also faced criminal charges for embezzling my husband's money. From their demeanor in Italy, I gathered that she had divorced Jim. Jim, who had wanted children as his successors, surprisingly had none with Rolla. It's likely that Rolla can no longer work as a nurse, a job she had for decades. The fact that she was the wife of a doctor who stole hospital funds will never leave her. Our encounter in Italy dramatically altered their fate. They probably never imagined their misdeeds would be exposed so far from home. I felt fear at this coincidence and was reminded that wrongdoing eventually comes to light. As for my husband and me, the incident seemed to strengthen our bond. We both stood up to them, angered by the insult to the person we love. While I could tolerate insults directed at myself, I couldn't bear those aimed at my loved one. Moreover, my husband must have been very uncomfortable meeting my former lover. He probably didn't want to see the face of such a person. Keeping Jim employed at his hospital must have been difficult for him. Yet, he continues to care for me as always. I'm deeply grateful for my husband's love and vow to stay by his side forever. Grandma, I'm hungry. What's for lunch? It was just before noon when my daughter Amelia, who was expecting her second child, brought her son Joseph back home. Joseph, waving his hands cheerfully, looked so adorable, and I replied with a warm heart. For lunch, we have Amelia's favorite omelet rice. Do you like it too, Joseph? Yeah. I love omelet rice. Joseph, spinning around with his arms raised in joy. Then, a loud noise came from the direction of the cupboard. Amelia? Rushing towards the cupboard, I found Amelia leaning tiredly on the desk, looking exhausted. Are you okay? Just as I stepped closer to support Amelia, something unbelievable happened right before my eyes. A small shadow moved incredibly fast towards Amelia and, with all its might, kicked her in the stomach. What? Amelia crouched down, and before her stood the small shadow. Joseph? Incredibly, the little shadow that had kicked Amelia, holding her stomach, was Joseph. I was stunned and incredulous for a moment, but quickly scolded Joseph. Hey, Joseph! What are you doing to Mom? Are you okay, Amelia? I immediately went to Amelia's side and whispered to her. Yes. I'm sorry. Amelia kept apologizing desperately. It was a huge shock to me that Joseph, so adorable and honest, would kick Amelia in the stomach. My husband Stephen, having witnessed everything, approached with a look full of anger. Joseph, I won't get mad, but explain why you did that. Joseph, with a puzzled look, said, What? It's discipline? Discipline? What does that mean? I, Olivia, have been supporting my husband Stephen for 35 years, and this year I finally turned 60. We have one child, our 31-year-old daughter Amelia. I've dedicated my life to being a housewife, focusing on household chores and raising our child, while Stephen, even though he worked, always found time to spend with Amelia on weekends and before bedtime. Amelia was the daughter we always wanted, and we raised her with all the love we could give from the moment she was in the womb. Especially Stephen, who had wanted a girl since we got married, showed an incredible amount of adoration. He gave her everything she wanted, from clothes and toys to snacks. And, without telling me, he even took her to game centers and shopping malls, which I found out about when Amelia got older. Amelia grew up to be a straightforward, cheerful girl who never went through a rebellious phase and was always full of smiles. She got married at 28 to Christopher and has been helping out with the restaurant owned by her in-laws in Christopher's hometown. I've only met Christopher's parents at the face-to-face meeting and the wedding, with little interaction otherwise. Christopher seemed serious but strong-willed, yet it appeared that calm Amelia had a softening effect on his personality. We thought Amelia, being our pampered child, would continue to live with us even after marrying Christopher. However, after days of pleading and talking about Christopher, Amelia convinced us, and before we knew it, she had left the family home. For a while after their marriage began, Amelia called us daily.
Dad, I made a delicious pot au feu today.
Typical Amelia.
Your pot au feu is always delicious.
Christopher is lucky to eat your wonderful cooking every day. Those simple exchanges filled our days with happiness, but they didn't last long. The calls became less frequent, from every other day to once a week, then once a month. At first, her happiness was evident, but as the calls became less frequent, they were often cut short because the store was busy. Even when Stephen tried every trick to keep the conversation going, he was often cut off. When I messaged Amelia, worried, her replies were not immediate, and sometimes there were days she didn't respond at all, which worried me. The birth of Amelia's first child, Joseph, was also communicated via message. However, after much pestering from Stephen and me, we finally met our much-longed-for grandson when Joseph turned 1, and since then, their visits home have been limited to once or twice a year. Despite feeling uneasy about Amelia's reluctance to come home when asked, time passed, and before we knew it, Joseph was old enough to start elementary school. We hardly heard from Amelia and her family, leaving us clueless about their lives. Stephen mentioned making several calls, but they never connected, much to his dismay. One evening, just after we finished dinner, the phone rang.
Hello?
Hi, Mom, is now a good time?
Yes, it's fine.
It was Amelia, calling for the first time in 6 months. Perhaps guessing from the look on my face, Stephen glanced over, prompting me to switch to speakerphone so he could hear too.
I'm about to give birth and was thinking of coming home, but I wonder if it's an inconvenience?
When did you get pregnant, Amelia? Stephen jumped up from his seat, as surprised by my words as I was by the news.
Really, Amelia? Did I not mention it? My due date is the 23rd.
We had no idea.
Really? Sorry, but yeah, I got pregnant. I've chosen a hospital and went for a few checkups. Sorry for the after-the-fact approval.
Despite the happy news, Amelia's voice sounded somber and hesitant.
Is it really okay? I know you and Dad are busy, and I hate to be a bother.
It seemed Amelia was more concerned about imposing on us with her return than the impending birth.
A bother? You're always welcome here.
Stephen eagerly replied before I could. That's right. We're always looking forward to you and Joseph visiting.
Thank you. Then I'll be in your care.
With those few words, Amelia ended the call.
Amelia? Amelia?
The abruptness left Stephen calling into the phone, but only the sound of the call ending responded.
Is Amelia okay?
Stephen gripped the phone, murmuring as if speaking directly to Amelia. Something was off with Amelia. I've never heard her sound so down. The joy of hearing our daughter's voice after so long was overshadowed by worry due to her uncharacteristically subdued demeanor. The following week, the day for Amelia and Joseph to return arrived. We went to the bus terminal early in the morning and waited eagerly. Soon, Amelia appeared, holding Joseph's hand.
Amelia! Joseph!
Stephen rushed over, waving enthusiastically.
Mom, who is that?
Joseph, noticing Stephen, didn't seem to remember him, having not met in over 3 years.
That's your granddad, and I'm your grandma.
Amelia approached with an apologetic look, greeting us. As they got closer, Stephen, trying to hide his shock at not being recognized, greeted them with a forced smile.
Amelia. Joseph. Have you been well?
Dad. Amelia's face stiffened, perhaps reading Stephen's expression. And she whispered something to Joseph.
Grandpa, Grandma will be in your care for a while.
Of course. Your family, so feel free to rely on us as much as you need. It was clear Amelia had instructed Joseph on what to say, so Stephen responded reassuringly. It saddened us to think Amelia felt the need to be considerate towards us, her parents. Joseph, resembling a younger Amelia, seemed to be clingy, constantly seeking praise.
Anyway, you must be tired after the long journey.
No, it's okay. Yet, Amelia looked noticeably paler and thinner than before.
Amelia, have you lost weight? Are you eating properly?
Yes. Amelia averted her eyes and began rubbing her arms defensively, avoiding my gaze. Then, noticing Amelia wouldn't even try to meet my eyes, looking downcast, I harbored some doubts. Stephen seemed to notice our daughter's odd behavior as well, suddenly turning serious.
Since it's been a while since you've come home, now is the time to be completely spoiled.
Yeah, thank you. However, Amelia's hesitant response made Stephen and me exchange glances and tilt our heads in confusion. Arriving home and in an attempt to take a breather, I decided to make some herbal tea, and Amelia entered the kitchen offering to help.
Amelia, you can rest, you know?
I can do it too, it's okay. Amelia, somewhat forcefully taking a dishcloth and starting to wipe the dining table, had a faint sweat on her forehead.
What's gotten into you, Amelia, being suddenly so independent?
It was unlike her. She had never even shown a hint of defiance to me before, but now she was turning her back on me as if she had changed.
It's nothing big. I've just come to understand the hardships of being a mom.
While she diligently wiped, speaking indifferently, she seemed so likely to collapse that I had no choice but to make her lie down in bed forcibly. Mom, I'm okay. Lying down, Amelia said in a faint voice, making me feel even more anxious.
Don't worry about Joseph. We're looking after him, so just try to get some sleep for now.
I'm sorry. Before, she would face me with a sunflower-like bright smile, but now Amelia seemed like a different person, trembling and curling up small.
It's not I'm sorry, it should be thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I continued to gently and slowly stroke Amelia's shoulder. And perhaps due to accumulated exhaustion, she fell asleep in less than 5 minutes. Meanwhile, Joseph, seemingly overflowing with energy, was playing with a toy train with Stephen. Watching them with a smile, I reminded them.
Make sure to tidy up after playing.
Okay. Joseph energetically raised his hand in response.
Good job on responding so well, Joseph. You're a good boy like Amelia.
Laughing, I left Joseph with Stephen and went out to shop for lunch preparations. Deciding to shake off an unfocused anxiety, I thought today we'd have Amelia's favorite omelet rice. When I returned from shopping and it was lunchtime, Amelia had just woken up. Did I sleep a lot?
Yes, you were sound asleep.
What should I do? Her face turned even paler with a frightened expression.
Is something wrong?
Quick, we need to prepare lunch. Ignoring my attempt to stop her, Amelia moved towards the cupboard as if possessed. Her behavior, more suspicious than I had ever seen, made me feel an increasing sense of foreboding. Just then, Stephen and Joseph, tired from playing and hungry, came in.
Grandma, I'm hungry. What's for lunch?
Their waving hands looked so endearing, and I answered warmly.
For lunch, we're having Amelia's favorite omelet rice. Do you like it too, Joseph? Yeah. I love omelet rice,
Joseph said, turning around with his hand raised. At that moment, a loud noise came from the direction of the cupboard.
Amelia?
Rushing over to the cupboard, Amelia, not fully recovered, appeared exhausted, leaning on the table.
Are you okay?
As I took a step closer to support Amelia, something unbelievable happened right before my eyes. A small shadow rushed towards Amelia at an incredible speed, and that shadow, with all its might, kicked Amelia's stomach hard.
What?
Amelia crouched down, and in front of her stood the small shadow.
Joseph?
To my astonishment, the small shadow that kicked Amelia, holding her stomach, was Joseph. Stunned and speechless, I snapped back to reality and scolded Joseph.
Hey, Joseph! What are you doing to Mom?
I quickly went to Amelia's side and whispered to her, Amelia, are you okay? Yes. I'm sorry. For some reason, Amelia kept desperately apologizing. The sight of Joseph, so adorable and obedient before, kicking his mom's stomach was a huge shock to me. Stephen, having witnessed the whole scene, approached with an angry expression. Joseph, I'm not angry, but explain why you did that. Stephen tried to remain as calm as possible, but it was clear he was struggling to contain his anger, clenching his fists. However, Joseph looked puzzled.
Huh? It's discipline, right?
Discipline? I didn't understand what he meant, but first, I had to help Amelia.
Amelia!
Supporting her shoulders, which couldn't focus her eyes, I looked into her eyes.
Amelia, what's wrong? You seem a bit off.
At those words, Amelia shivered and collapsed onto the floor.
Amelia, are you okay?
Amelia continued to breathe heavily, clutching her stomach. Amelia. I gently touched Amelia's back. Feeling the warmth of my hand, Amelia's breathing slowly calmed down. I decided to keep stroking Amelia's back while keeping an eye on Stephen and the others. Joseph is a good, obedient child, and I felt there must be some reason behind Amelia's behavior.
Joseph, what's going on?
Joseph's face, on the verge of tears, looked up at Stephen, who was now red-faced and angry, unrecognizable from the person who had been playing with him just moments before. But Dad said. At Joseph's softly spoken words, Stephen's brow furrowed. Bursting into tears, Joseph continued. Dad said, it's Mom's discipline.
What do you mean?
When Dad's not here, and Mom messes up, he told me to discipline her. Joseph managed to say between sobs. If I don't discipline her, Mom will get scolded even more.
That's...
Then, Amelia, coughing, managed to squeeze out some words. It's not Joseph's fault. If we don't do this, Joseph gets hit by Christopher. With those words, the bad feeling I had been harboring finally became clear. You've been enduring so much. Imagining Amelia enduring Christopher's treatment all alone without anyone to rely on, tears overflowed. We've been under Christopher's watch. I couldn't say anything until now. Amelia also started to cry big tears.
Amelia, not just you, but Joseph and the baby in your belly. You can't be happy staying with Christopher. What Mom says is right. I can't forgive what he did to our precious daughter.
The tears streaming down Amelia's cheeks didn't stop, and Stephen's words seemed to hit home as she finally voiced her true feelings.
Dad, Mom, I want to cut ties with Christopher.
You did well to say that. Actually, I've been carrying around divorce papers I signed, thinking someday I'd file for divorce.
Amelia revealed she had brought them with her this visit, and Stephen immediately said,
Let's call Christopher over right now.
But will he come? Christopher always prioritized his store over listening to Amelia's requests, and she looked doubtful he would comply. Stephen, calling Christopher with a firm tone, said,
Christopher, come to the house right now.
Though I couldn't hear the voice on the other end, from Stephen's manner, Christopher seemed reluctant.
You know what will happen if you don't come, right?
Stephen's forehead veins bulged, and his face turned red, unaccustomed to such actions.
Let's talk more when you get here.
After finally hanging up, Stephen looked displeased.
Are you okay? I'll just take a little water and rest.
After I handed him the water, he drank it down in one go, holding his head. Stephen seemed to have used up a lot of energy in just those few minutes and slumped down on the sofa. Joseph sat beside Amelia, who still couldn't stand up. I clenched my back teeth, pondering what might happen next. Hours later, Christopher arrived, his hair disheveled and dressed carelessly, with a sulky demeanor.
Really? I have work, and now this all of a sudden.
Seeing Christopher's attitude, as if he would attack Amelia the moment we weren't looking, Stephen, who had slightly recovered, spoke up.
What you've done to our precious daughter.
Ah. Christopher replied nonchalantly as if he had grasped something, then glared at Joseph. Without hesitation, Joseph stood in front of Amelia, spreading his small body as wide as he could.
I disciplined Mom instead of Dad, so don't be mad at her anymore.
Christopher slowly started moving towards Joseph and Amelia, prompting Stephen to step in front of the two.
If you move even a step further, I won't hold back.
At Stephen's deep, resonating warning, Christopher shook his head in annoyance, placing his hands on his hips.
Blaming me for everything. What's wrong with disciplining a poorly performing wife?
Christopher glared at Stephen with muddy eyes, showing no sign of remorse.
This is why I hated spoiled princesses. Do you have any idea how much I've hurt my hands trying to educate this worthless wife?
Revealing his abusive behavior towards Amelia without any shame. Furious at Christopher's attitude, I stood next to Stephen.
Amelia is pregnant, you know? What if something happened to the baby? Even if she wasn't pregnant, hitting your wife is the lowest of the low.
The lowest, huh?
Amelia, who does chores and parenting half-heartedly, is far worse. Christopher started saying unbelievable things while scratching his head.
Lately, I've been having Joseph do the disciplining because I don't want to waste time on this useless wife. But he can't do it right, just like his mom.
As if discussing tomorrow's weather, he casually mentioned how he would hit Joseph for not disciplining properly, then Amelia even more harshly.
That's unforgivable.
Discovering the unimaginable hardships his beloved daughter had been shouldering, Stephen burst into tears.
Am I really that bad? I was raised this way, and making a fuss over this seems ridiculous.
Apparently, Christopher's parents were aware of and complicit in his actions towards Amelia.
Seriously, give me a break. It's ridiculous that I'm being blamed.
Christopher showed no remorse, instead acting as if he were the victim.
Listen here.
Stephen's anger exploded, and he disappeared into the next room, only to return with several documents.
I don't care about your family, but Amelia and you are getting a divorce.
He then thrust a document at Christopher. Christopher raised his eyebrows slightly upon seeing it. The document Stephen presented was the divorce petition signed by Amelia. Stephen had received the divorce petition from Amelia before Christopher arrived.
I don't mind divorcing Amelia.
Christopher fluidly signed the divorce petition and handed it back to Stephen. Securing the petition with both their signatures, Stephen prepared another document.
Also, I thought Amelia might need support, so I've been financially supporting your parents' store. I want it all back.
As he piled on with another document, Christopher's eyes widened and he collapsed to the ground. The second document, signed by Stephen, related to the financial support, detailing the total amount of support and the possibility of a lump sum repayment as per Stephen's discretion. As an executive of a large company, Stephen had provided significant financial support to Christopher's parents' store, amounting to $100,000. Sitting on the floor, Christopher finally spoke.
I can't give up Joseph, the heir. And there's no way I can repay the funds.
As if there's such a convenient story.
Don't you have any compassion? I'm the man your precious daughter loved. Joining forces with Stephen.
After readily agreeing to the divorce with Amelia, it's absurd to talk about warmth and love.
Is it okay for me to end up like this? Amelia? Desperate, Christopher turned his anger towards Amelia. However, Amelia, having been continuously mistreated but now protected by us, responded with a firm stance.
I don't care what happens to you. As long as I have Joseph and the baby, I'll be happy.
So that's how it is. Having already signed the divorce papers, Christopher seemed to realize he had no recourse and said nothing further, appearing as if his soul had left him. Afterward, Amelia and Christopher's divorce was finalized, and with the loss of Stephen's financial support, Christopher's parents' shop suffered greatly. Faced with financial difficulties, Christopher accumulated debt in an attempt to save the business, but it ultimately failed miserably. Simultaneously, rumors of Christopher's violence towards Amelia and Joseph spread among the neighbors, leading to Christopher being ousted from his family home. Christopher has since been struggling to repay his debts, recognized as a violent man, working tirelessly day and night in a factory located in a remote area, far from his hometown. With Christopher out of the picture, Amelia, having gained custody of Joseph, returned to live with us. On a comfortably sunny autumn day, a healthy cry could be heard from the hospital room.
Amelia, how is it?
Stephen, as always, charged towards Amelia like a wild boar, prompting me to quickly calm him from behind. Dear, you'll startle the newborn with that kind of energy.
Oh, sorry.
Stopping in front of Amelia as if slamming on the brakes, Stephen flashed a smile as sweet as melted ice cream.
She looks just like Amelia, a beautiful girl.
Thank you. With a serene smile, Amelia looked completely relieved. That smile was indeed the full-bloom sunflower we knew Amelia could be.
Mom!
Joseph, who had been restlessly waiting, approached Amelia happily.
Joseph, you're a big brother now, say hello.
The baby, just ceased crying, gazed into Joseph's large eyes.
I'm your big brother.
The baby, grasping Joseph's tentatively extended hand, seemed to smile as if responding.
How adorable!
Joseph, with his hand firmly grasped in return, immediately showed a brave face befitting a big brother.
Have you decided on a name for her?
Stephen asked Amelia with a smile. I'm thinking of naming her Emma. Amelia's words, spoken cheerfully, resonated deeply with me.
Thank you, Emma, for being born safely.
My spontaneous words made both Stephen and Amelia nod quietly, their eyes moist. After being discharged, Amelia and her family brought vibrant life to our home. Miraculously, Amelia bore no physical scars, and the newly born Emma was the epitome of health, always smiling.
We'll be living with my real mom, so you can go to some cheap facility for the elderly.
Good luck with your life then. My name is Linda. I've been married to Snow for 10 years. Snow has a child from a previous marriage, Carrie. Perhaps because we got married during Carrie's teenage years, Carrie has never really taken to me. Despite my efforts to get along, it seemed to only make things worse, and it became evident that Carrie disliked me more as time went on. So, I've been keeping a respectful distance. I inherited an apartment from my parents and manage it as a rental property. It brings in a considerable amount each month, which I've been saving for a comfortable retirement since I have no reason to use my money. Snow has a lot of pride and can't stand things not going his way, which has made it difficult for him to keep a job for long. As a result, he earns less than the average man of his age. That's also why I never shared the details of my rental income with him. One day, as I was cleaning like usual, Carrie came home, slamming the door open.
It's so hot. Wow, this room is stifling. I can't believe you can stand it here. Unbelievable.
Saying that, Carrie turned down the air conditioning.
Welcome home. You're early. It's too hot to work, so I left early. Left early? Did you tell anyone at work you were leaving? Why should I? Someone will notice.
Hearing this, I sighed internally. Carrie is capricious, acting on whim without much thought for consequences. Like today, leaving work early on a whim, or canceling plans with friends if not feeling it. Moreover, Carrie complains when friends don't go along with plans. It seems Carrie doesn't realize this behavior has been pushing people away. I've even received a call from Carrie's workplace before. It was about Carrie's attitude at work, saying, "Pock."
We've sent to him multiple times about his work attitude, but there's been no improvement. Could the family possibly discuss this?
However, when I mentioned this to Snow, he was furious with the company. He told Carrie to quit such an inflexible job, and Carrie did. He has always doted on Carrie, spoiling her considerably. Of course, it's natural to cherish one's daughter, but he never disciplined her, always bending to her will. As a stepmother due to remarriage, I felt it was wrong to continue this way. I tried to teach Carrie about empathy, manners, and posture, but she wouldn't accept it, and my husband told me not to interfere, leading me to give up. While resuming cleaning and sighing, Carrie's mobile phone started ringing.
Yikes, it's my manager. Hello?
No, I've already gone home for the day.
Oh? I forgot about that meeting with a client today. Please apologize on my behalf.
It was clear from listening how selfish her reasoning was. Watching her talk to her manager while lounging on the sofa, I sighed again. Later that night, Snow came home. As I was warming up his dinner, Carrie entered the dining room.
Dad, you're home. Listen, it was so hot today, right? That's why I left work early.
She began telling him about her day.
Really? So you got a lecture from your manager for that? Why not quit if the company restricts your freedom?
Right?
I've been thinking about it.
Listening to their conversation, I felt dismayed. But I knew better than to intervene, as it would only lead to a quarrel, so I silently prepared his dinner. While he was eating, Carrie, talking and eating, caused him to drop his fork. As I picked it up silently, he started.
This fork is hard to use. You bought this, right? If it was easier to use, I wouldn't drop it.
This was nothing new. He has such high pride that he never admits fault. Really, Linda, you're so inconsiderate. I'm sorry. I'll buy something easier to use. Apologizing seemed to satisfy him, and I occasionally reminisced about how I didn't realize how proud he was when we were dating, thinking he was a kind person. Maybe I'm just tired. After a while, Carrie went back to her room, and I was washing the dinner dishes.
Today we started using a new tool at work, but it doesn't suit me, so I submitted a feedback form to my boss. A feedback form?
Yes.
I can't have it slowing down my work. Honestly, doing things manually is best.
But if it's the company's decision, shouldn't you try to adapt? Saying that made my husband visibly upset.
Are you saying I'm wrong?
No, that's not it at all. I'm sorry.
If this proposal doesn't get approved, I'm quitting my job. I don't want to work under these conditions.
It seems the saying "like father, like son" perfectly describes this situation. Snow, like Carrie, has a hard time sticking with a job. At the slightest dissatisfaction, he's ready to quit, having left several companies already. He's 53 this year. Does he really think finding another job at his age will be easy? Talking with him only tires me out, so I decide to go to bed early. A month passed, and I started to notice something off with my husband. It seemed like my intuition was right. He always had his phone with him, now locked tight. On his days off, he'd head out for golf with his boss every week, and he started coming home later from work. I couldn't help but wonder if he was having an affair, but oddly, I wasn't as shocked as I thought I'd be. Is it because of age? Or has my love for him simply withered away? Feeling restless about it all, I decided to hire a detective to look into it. The detective was very understanding and agreed to take the case. About 3 weeks after hiring them, I got the results. It was bad news. My husband was indeed having an affair. Surprisingly, I was able to stay calm as I listened. But hearing who it was with felt like a knife twisting in my heart. It was his ex-wife. Among the photos the detective showed me, some even included Carrie, showing they'd been meeting up without me knowing. Realizing I was betrayed by the two people I could call family was devastating. Seeing my distress, the detective offered, "If you're considering a divorce, I can introduce you to a lawyer who specializes in such cases." I took the lawyer's business card just to be cautious, let them know I'd talk things over, and left with the investigation results. When my husband returned home late at night, and with Carrie already asleep, I broached the subject. I showed him the detective's findings and demanded an explanation. At first, he was taken aback by the results, but then he quickly turned defensive and started questioning me.
Why are you doing this? You trying to make a fool out of me?
I didn't want to make a fool out of you. I was just concerned about your behavior and wanted to know the truth.
So, are you satisfied now?
No, I want to hear it from you. What were you thinking, having an affair?
An affair? It might look that way. But it's your fault, you know. What do you mean? I married you, even though you were secondhand, and you don't earn money, you're getting older, and you've never shown any gratitude for everything I've done for you. Is there any benefit for me being with you?
Hearing this, I realized he had no idea about our financial situation. He didn't know that the rent and living expenses were almost entirely covered by my rental income. His salary from job hopping surely wasn't increasing, likely much less than his peers. He was oblivious to that fact.
Are you serious? Of course I am. And you should know, the affair was with my ex-wife. Carrie is happy about us getting back together. There's no need for me to continue living with you. Carrie's happiness is my priority.
I understand how you feel. So, we're thinking of divorce then?
It's not a matter of thinking, it's decided. It's actually good timing that this came out now. Get the divorce papers first thing tomorrow.
Facing such cruel statements, I no longer felt sadness. Instead, I was overwhelmed by regret, wondering why I ever ended up with this person.
Understood. I'll go to the municipal office tomorrow. How will you explain it to Carrie?
Don't worry about it, I'll tell her. She hates you anyway.
Okay.
Though I knew he was not one to admit his faults, I was still taken aback by his blatant lack of concern. This unexpected reaction left me feeling even more dejected. Realizing I had never been needed hit me hard, making me question my entire existence up until now. The next day, I went to the municipal office to get the divorce papers. Stopping by a convenience store to buy a drink, I rummaged through my bag and found a business card. A lawyer. It was the card the detective had given me the day before. Considering the situation had escalated to divorce, I decided to seek advice. After collecting the divorce papers, I called the law firm straight away. Mentioning the detective's referral, I was able to smoothly secure an appointment. There had been a cancellation for the next day, so I booked that slot immediately. While preparing dinner as usual, Carrie came home.
Ew, making dinner even though you're getting a divorce? Is this some kind of lingering attachment?
It seemed she had already been informed by Snow.
If you don't want it, you don't have to eat.
As I continued cooking, Carrie started complaining, clearly displeased.
Why did Dad even marry you? I was against it from the start. Living under the same roof as an old person has been suffocating. Hearing about the divorce made me genuinely happy. Well, that's good for you. I also hated your pretentious attitude, acting as if you're not affected at all. Now you'll be all alone. Yes, I guess I will. I'll make the most of it.
Carrie left the house with a click of her tongue. That night, neither of them returned, and I ate dinner alone. The next day, I went to the law firm for my appointment and explained my situation to the lawyer. He suggested suing my husband and his affair partner for compensation. And I agreed to let him represent me. Returning home, I found my husband and Carrie waiting.
Where have you been? A housewife leaving the house. Who do you think you are?
Really? Hope you weren't out spending Dad's money. I went to get the divorce papers from the office. So you're home today?
Placing the divorce papers on the table, Carrie rejoiced, and Snow started to fill them out immediately.
Oh, hurry up and pack your things and leave.
Carrie said this nastily, laughing beside my husband who was filling out the divorce papers.
Me? Of course. You're the one who has to leave.
Why? Because we're getting divorced. It's obvious. Do as Carrie says. We'll be living with my real mom, so you can go to some cheap facility for the elderly.
Even though I pay $2,000 in rent? I thought, but if they were going that far, I decided I might as well leave.
All right, I'll leave. If that's what you want. They had no other choice. You were just in the way.
Ugh, hurry up and pack your stuff.
Disgusted by their insults, I retreated to my room to pack my belongings.
Now we can live as a family with Mom again.
Yay!
Indeed. It's my fault for marrying such a person, causing you distress. Let's be a happy family of 3 again. Their loud celebrations were audible even from my room. Feeling degraded, I decided to move to a retirement home I had considered for my old age. The next day, I took my things and headed there. On the way, I called my lawyer to discuss the settlement. The lawyer, equally appalled, reassured me, suggesting that moving might actually bring me happiness. I was headed to a renowned luxury retirement home, known nationwide, requiring a $1,000 entry fee. Despite its cost, its popularity was unmatched due to its excellent facilities. I had been saving up the rental income for when I turned 60, paying for the entrance fee to what I thought we'd enjoy together. But now, it seems even better that I'll be there alone. Leaving the legal matters to my lawyer, I also sought a bit of retribution by contacting a certain service. I didn't expect things to end without incident. A week after I left, Carrie called. Hello? What do you want?
What do I want? Some junk shop just came and took all our furniture. What's the meaning of this?
Oh, I sold it.
Sold it? How dare you do such a thing without permission?
Of course. It was all mine, after all.
What? What are you talking about?
Exactly that. All the furniture and appliances were mine. Since I no longer live there, they're unnecessary, right?
But that sofa was my favorite. I used it the most, so it's mine, right?
I don't follow that logic. If you liked it so much, you should buy it yourself. I believe that sofa was around $13,000.
$13,000? Are you kidding? But the bed. That bed is mine. Dad bought it for me.
I was the one who bought that bed. He just told me to buy it.
What? But wasn't it bought with Dad's money?
I bought it with my money. That's why I'm saying I sold my belongings. Everything that's gone, I purchased.
No way. Everything in the house. But this is too much. Bring everything back.
That's impossible. You'll have to figure it out yourselves.
Ugh. Fine. I'll tell Dad on you.
Feel free. Carrie hung up immediately. I anticipated a call from my ex-husband soon after, and sure enough, my phone rang with his name displayed.
Hello? I heard from Carrie. What have you done?
You're aware, right? Everything was mine.
Even so, you left, so the ownership transferred to me. What's yours is also mine.
What are you talking about? I never transferred any ownership. If you want something, you should buy it yourself.
That's because you did this on your own. You should take responsibility. It's absurd I have to spend money because of you.
Wow, your pride really knows no bounds. I'm busy, so I'm hanging up now.
Wait a minute.
I noticed my ex was trying to say something more, but I hung up without hesitation. I was in the middle of a spa treatment, after all. In the luxury retirement home I moved into, there's a relaxation room where you can get spa treatments by reservation. I ignored the multiple calls that followed. The next day, I received a call from a payphone. Curious, I answered, and it was Carrie.
You picked up. Why aren't you answering your phone? We're in trouble here without the furniture and appliances. Put everything back.
It's you. As I said yesterday, if you need those things, buy them yourselves.
Dad says he has no money. You took it all, didn't you?
No, why would I? His bank book and card are still at the house.
What? Then why does he say he has no money?
Probably because he has a spending habit. Maybe he has no savings.
What? Then how have we been living?
I was covering living expenses.
Huh? You're not working. What are you talking about?
I don't work, but I had an income from rent.
What do you mean? Rental income? So you were managing properties? Then what was Dad spending his salary on?
Yes, so I could afford to pay for our living expenses. I don't know what Snow spent his salary on. You should ask him directly. Are we done here? Wait. If you have so much money, then why? I hung up the phone. They had no idea how they had been living, such foolish people. I felt no sympathy anymore. There's no way they could live on my ex's meager salary alone. Despite knowing his own salary, he seemed to think he was supporting us with it alone. Even though his income wouldn't even cover the rent. It was my rental income that made our life possible. Now that we're divorced, their standard of living must have significantly dropped, but that's none of my concern anymore. By now, the real mom, his affair partner, must have moved in, so they should sort out their living situation amongst themselves. Calls from Carrie and my ex continued but gradually became less frequent. As I was getting used to my new life, the lawyer called.
We've successfully filed for damages, and the other party is willing to pay. It should be resolved smoothly.
The fact that my prideful ex-husband agreed without any complaints was slightly surprising, but since the lawyer said so, it must be true. I was happy thinking that this would finally sever our ties.
Thank you. I appreciate your help a bit longer. Of course, let's keep at it.
After hanging up with the lawyer, I felt a bit more upbeat than usual, thinking about taking a swim in the facility's pool. Then the phone rang again. Checking my mobile, I saw my ex-husband's name, appearing for the first time in about a month. Hesitant, but not wanting to stir things up after coming this far, I decided to answer the call.
Hello, it's me. Rent hasn't been withdrawn since last month. I need your help. Help? For rent?
His request was baffling.
You were supposed to handle the rent. Think about our situation without furniture and only essentials, and you're not even paying the rent. I have nothing to do with it anymore. Why should I pay rent for a place I don't live in, especially since we're divorced?
As I said that, he seemed to get instantly infuriated.
What did you say? How much more selfish can you get? This was originally your house. You were the one who told me to leave. The selfishness is on your end. If you keep this up, I won't pay the compensation. Just pay the rent already.
From what standpoint is he even speaking? This is beyond just pride. I felt disillusioned all over again.
Could you discuss the compensation with the lawyer, please? No matter what you say, I'm not paying the rent. Maybe you should check what common sense is. What's with that tone? Who do you think has been supporting you all this time? Well, actually, I have. Huh? I thought I was the one supporting you. So, whatever difficult life you're leading now, I don't care. Goodbye.
I hung up on Snow and headed to the pool. I was looking forward to a nice swim, but he ruined the mood. However, on my way to the pool, I ran into a friend I made at the facility, who was also headed to the pool, and we had a great time swimming together. Maybe I'm simpler than I thought. After coming back from the pool, I saw my phone lighting up with notifications. It seemed there had been a call. Feeling a sense of dread, I checked to see that it was indeed Carrie. As I hesitated whether to call back, my mobile phone started ringing again. Sigh, hello?
What's with that sigh? And what do you mean by not paying the rent?
It was about the rent again. Why should I pay for a house I don't even live in anymore? It seems obvious to anyone.
I've already told Snow, why should I pay it? We're divorced now. I don't live there, and I have no relation to you two. Why should I pay rent for strangers? So, you're just trying to make us suffer, huh? Mom was crying. You sold all our furniture and appliances, and now there's rent overdue, and on top of that, a compensation claim. How much more trouble do you plan to cause us?
Carrie spoke as if they were the victims. I couldn't help but think she's going to have a hard time if she keeps up this mentality.
Do you know what goes around comes around means? The actions you take will always come back to you. How is it that 3 adults can't even pay rent? What was your plan for living? Didn't you think about anything?
Challenged, Carrie began to falter.
Well, that's because Dad said he was a manager and his income was high, so we thought we'd just live off his salary like before. I thought life wouldn't change even if you left and Mom came.
He's a manager. I couldn't help but laugh. My ex-husband, who has never held a job for more than 3 years, a manager.
Impossible. It became clear he had been inflating his ego to his daughter with baseless pride.
Don't laugh.
Carrie got defensive. Such a pitiful family. I don't know about the affair partner, but they must share similar values to consider reuniting.
Snow has never been promoted. He's never even been a manager, let alone a department head. What? That's not what I heard. Why don't you face reality for once? Reevaluate your situation, all three of you.
After I said that, Carrie hung up with a sob. It sounded like she was crying, but I don't regret what I said because I don't believe I was wrong. Later, the lawyer informed me that my ex had been hesitant about the compensation payment but suddenly agreed and completed the payment. This sudden change in attitude made me suspect something was amiss. The lawyer advised caution, uncertain of what my ex might do next. Though it's unlikely he knows my current whereabouts or could directly confront me, I decided not to answer any more calls from him, now that the compensation issue was resolved. With the divorce finalized and the compensation settled, our business was concluded. After thanking the lawyer, who assured me of their support in case of any future issues, I expressed my gratitude once again and ended the call politely. Despite having resolved everything, a lingering sense of unease and a bad premonition turned into reality. The next day, I received a call from the front desk to my room, saying a family claiming to be my relatives had arrived. It was my ex-husband and Carrie. My bad feeling was confirmed. Since I no longer considered them family, I asked them to be sent away, which they agreed to do, relieving me. I wondered how they found out where I was and what they wanted now, but decided not to dwell on it since I had chosen to cut ties. Later, as I was heading to the facility's restaurant, I happened to glance at the lobby. To my surprise, my ex-husband and Carrie were still there, arguing with the security guard and the front desk staff. Shocked, I instinctively hid. It was inconceivable they were causing trouble for others to this extent. My frustration grew.
We're here because our mom lives here. Don't make us say it again. Exactly. Get our room ready now. And it better be the best one. We're hungry, so prepare some food too. This place serves a full course meal every day, right? Awesome.
Hearing their words pushed me to my limit. Enough already, I said as I approached the lobby.
Mom, you finally came. Come on, take us to our room quickly. We were arranged to live in such a nice place with you. You're finally being useful.
Their attitude had changed 180 degrees, making me feel uneasy. They looked at me with full smiles, the kind that made me uncomfortable for the first time in my life. The front desk staff and security guard apologized to me, looking sorry. However, the ones at fault were this parent and child. Don't apologize. You've done nothing wrong, I told them, and they gave me a kind smile in return.
So, you sold the furniture and didn't pay the rent because of this. I finally understand. No, you got it wrong. There's no place for you here. Please leave.
What are you talking about? You moved here for us, right? Their entitlement irritated me to no end.
That's ridiculous. Stop it. This is my home. If you really want to move in, do the paperwork yourselves.
When I yelled, Carrie and my ex-husband seemed a bit shaken. They had never heard me raise my voice before.
What's got you so mad? Because we came late? To think we bothered to come here, and this is the reception we get. But we'll let it slide this time. Hurry up and show us to our room. I really can't get through to you, can I? All right, I'll show you to your room.
They seemed relieved at my words, completely missing the point I was trying to make.
Could you please call the police?
Right now,
I asked the staff.
mentioning the police made them panic instantly.
What do you mean? Police? What are you talking about? I did say I'd show you to your room, didn't I? It's probably at the police station. Lucky you. And if you really want to stay here, come back when you're over 60.
I smiled sweetly, and the front desk staff immediately picked up the phone.
Wait. No need for the police, right? We came here for you.
For me?
When did I ever ask you to come? We couldn't find where you were living, so we hired a detective. And when we heard you were living in such a nice place, we decided to come.
From Carrie's words, it became clear how they found this place. It seemed their only motive was money.
So you're after money, right? Unable to pay a rent of $2,000, unable to fully furnish your home, and from our interactions, you figured I had money and decided to look for me, right?
They fell silent at my direct hit. No, we didn't know the rent was $2,000, and Mom thought living with us in that house meant a luxurious life. She wanted back in, but after seeing the reality, she left.
Carrie! Don't say that! Don't you have any pride?
But, as they started to argue in front of me, I could only watch in disbelief.
Anyway, if you can afford to live here, you should be using that money for us, your family. Since you're rich, you can pay back the loans we took out for the affairs compensation money, right?
Hearing this, everything clicked. They were evicted, life became tough, and they hired a detective with their last dime to find me, discovering I lived in a luxurious retirement home, planning to mooch off me. Assuming I was wealthy, they paid the affairs compensation with borrowed money, intending for me to repay their debts, a pitiful and absurd story. Who could make sense of such a situation? I have nothing left to say to you. We're complete strangers now. The police will be here soon, so just wait. As I said this coldly, they seemed to finally grasp their situation a bit, turning pale and starting to shake.
Okay, I get it. I was wrong. Please, spare us from the police. Let's start over.
I apologize too. I'm sorry. Please forgive us. You could see the disdain in the eyes of the people around us. I felt the same way, devoid of any sympathy for these two hopeless individuals. As they were apologizing profusely to me, the police arrived. The front desk staff and security explained the situation, and I also shared the details with the police, who then took the two away.
No! Not the police! Let go of me! Stop it!
Watching them being led away screaming and yelling, I felt a sense of closure. As I sighed, the front desk staff brought me a warm cup of tea and invited me to sit on a sofa in the lobby to rest. The warm tea tasted incredibly good. Later on, it turned out that my ex-husband and Carrie had been evicted for failing to pay their rent. Moreover, assuming they could live with me in the luxurious retirement home, they had quit their jobs. After being released by the police, they had nowhere to go and were staying in a motel. However, as their meager savings began to dwindle, they hurriedly looked for work and found a live-in job. They were relieved to have found a place to live, but the job was demanding, rife with cliques, and they struggled with interpersonal relationships, barely scraping by on a low salary. As for me, I'm living a life of elegance I wouldn't have experienced had I stayed married. Sometimes I indulge in spa treatments, other times I exercise, or I go out for karaoke with friends, leading a very fulfilling life. There are also plenty of events within the facility, which has led to an increase in my hobbies. Becoming friends with other residents and having more friends has allowed me to lead a luxuriously busy life filled with fun and happiness. Something feels off. I try to pinch my cheeks to ward off the sudden wave of sleepiness, but it's utterly ineffective. There wasn't anything particularly exhausting about today, just a meal at my in-laws. And I'm not usually short on sleep. Why then, I wonder drowsily when I hear my husband's laughter.
Good night, LOL. I'll make sure you have sweet dreams.
My name is Lila, a 24-year-old office worker, newly married to Riley, who is 5 years my senior. We met through a friend and, after dating for 2 years, were happily married. We had a grand wedding recently and received blessings from many people. Just as I was dreaming about our happy married life ahead, an unexpected misfortune struck. Emerson, my mother-in-law, suddenly fell ill and passed away in no time. Emerson was cheerful and very kind, delighted when I first went to greet her.
Nice to meet you, I'm Lila. Oh, what a joy to have such a lovely woman as my son's wife. I've always dreamed of having tea time with my son's wife. I'd be delighted. Please, let's have tea time together.
Though I was nervous, Emerson welcomed me with a full smile, making me feel at ease and fond of her. We had planned to have tea time together after the wedding settled down, but that dream was shattered with Emerson's passing. We were busy with Emerson's funeral, sorting out her belongings, and handling the inheritance, finally settling down a year later. Then, I got a call from Trevor, my father-in-law.
Layla, how about a meal at our house next weekend night? I'm thinking of ordering takeout. Yes, of course. Thank you.
So, I was invited to dine with Trevor next weekend night, along with Riley. Trevor ordered Singaporean cuisine, which he loves, and we enjoyed the feast. The three of us gathered around the dining table. It was my first time trying Singaporean cuisine, and everything was delicious. Except, the soup tasted oddly. Curious, I asked my husband.
Hey Riley, doesn't this soup taste a bit strange? That's just how this dish is. You're not used to Singaporean cuisine, haha.
Though Riley laughed it off, I couldn't stomach the soup, so I avoided it and ate the other dishes. Then, I felt Trevor's sharp gaze.
Lila, I went through the trouble of ordering this, so make sure you drink the soup.
Startled by Trevor's outburst, I hurriedly gulped down the soup. It still tasted weird. The strange taste spread throughout my mouth, and I tried to cleanse my palate with water and other dishes. Gradually, my vision blurred, and I found myself slumping over the table. What's happening? I'm incredibly sleepy. This isn't good. I'll really fall asleep. I need to stay awake. As my consciousness faded, I could hear Riley's laughter. It seems to have worked. Dad, is that thing ready? Of course, it's all set. It's in the dresser drawer in the bedroom. The new ones are amazing, only 0.01 millimeters thick. We didn't have those when I was young. Realizing Riley and Trevor were discussing contraceptives, I felt a sense of danger but then lost consciousness completely. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. What happened? I murmured groggily.
Oh, thank goodness. You're awake.
Looking towards the voice, there was our neighbor, Luella. Luella immediately called the doctor, who explained that I had been given a large dose of sleeping pills.
Sleeping pills! So that's why the soup tasted so odd.
Then, I learned from Luella. Your dad and husband ran off in the car, so I accompanied you in the ambulance. I'm so glad you woke up safely. Really? Thank you so much. I'm sorry for the trouble. But, what do you mean Dad and my husband fled in a car? Actually, Luella found out that the fire alarm was ringing at my in-laws' house and it wouldn't stop, so she decided to check on them. When she rang the doorbell, Trevor came out. Yes.
What's going on, ringing the fire alarm like this? It's been going off for so long. Haven't you found the source yet? This is serious. I'm coming in. Please, it's okay. Don't come into the house.
What are you talking about? We're supposed to help each other out in times of need. Luella said that, barging into the house, and found me lying listlessly in the living room.
Oh my! You've collapsed from inhaling smoke. This is terrible. I need to call an ambulance right away. No, this is different.
Trevor and my husband tried to deny it hastily, but Luella was convinced I had collapsed from smoke inhalation and called for emergency and fire services on the spot.
Lila is just sleeping.
That's right. My wife is just tired and sleeping. There's nothing to worry about. Despite their desperate explanations, Luella objected.
It's strange that she won't wake up with such a loud noise going on. I'm worried. I wonder if the ambulance will arrive soon.
Luella was frantic. Before we knew it, people had started gathering. Riley and Trevor began to sweat profusely. Soon after, Riley and Trevor hurriedly jumped into a car and fled, leaving me behind. That's why Luella ended up accompanying me in the ambulance. Such a thing. Thank you so much. I expressed my gratitude to Luella. Then, when I told the doctor about the conversation I heard between Riley and Trevor before losing consciousness, he grimaced and made a call, and I was informed that Riley and Trevor were also admitted to the same hospital.
Riley and Dad are hospitalized. Why?
Apparently, after fleeing the house in the car, Riley and Trevor were driving frantically to get as far away as possible. As a result, the car Riley was driving crashed into the wall of a mansion, causing an accident. Both were brought to this hospital by ambulance, severely injured with broken bones, but their lives were not in danger. Hearing the reason for their admission, I was overwhelmed with anger, disgust, and various other emotions.
They got what they deserved. I'll never forgive them.
I decided to hire a lawyer and sue over this incident. Then, sleeping pills were detected in the soup bowl I had finished, and Riley and Trevor were arrested for assault. The news even reported on the incident. Later, during the police investigation, they were rearrested for attempted rape. Trevor was stressed from being busy with Emerson's funeral and other matters, becoming frustrated. He was planning to visit a nightclub, but when Riley found out, he made a proposition to Trevor.
Dad, if you're that frustrated, I can lend you Lila. But in return, give me Mom's kimonos. Really? I'd be thrilled to be with young Lila, but... Why Mom's kimonos? Are you running out of money? Yeah, I kinda blew through my savings.
Riley had squandered his savings on gambling and offered me in exchange for Emerson's kimonos, which came from a distinguished family and were valuable. Riley knew this and proposed the trade to Trevor.
Lila doesn't know I'm hooked on gambling. I've used quite a bit from our joint savings account, so I want to cover it up before she finds out. I see. But I can't imagine Lila agreeing to be with me. That's okay. I have a good idea. You still have some of Mom's sleeping pills, right?
Emerson had been prescribed sleeping pills for her insomnia before she passed away. With those sleeping pills remaining, Riley and Trevor concocted their plan. They decided to dissolve powdered sleeping pills in the soup and proceed after I had fallen asleep.
Perfect plan, right? This way I get money, and Dad's frustration is relieved. It's all good.
Right. Let's invite Lila over for a dinner party next weekend. However, their scheme was abruptly foiled by the ringing of the fire alarm, leading to the foolish outcome of causing an accident in their haste to flee in the car. It turns out Riley and Trevor are hospitalized in the same room.
Damn it! How did it come to this? It was supposed to be a perfect plan.
If only the fire alarm hadn't gone off. In the end, we couldn't do anything with Lila and ended up getting seriously injured.
What a mess.
Damn it!
As they openly wept and voiced their grievances, a nurse visiting their room informed them with displeasure. I had demanded compensation through a lawyer in the divorce proceedings, but both of them flatly refused to pay any settlement for the divorce.
To demand compensation from me, her husband, in a divorce trial. Nothing actually happened, so it should be fine. That's right! In the end, all we did was give Lila sleeping pills and nothing else.
Both their reasoning left me and my lawyer utterly dumbfounded. Even when told that administering sleeping pills without consent is unacceptable, they wouldn't listen at all. Moreover,
Hey! Lila! Tell the police not to sue me and Dad. If the victim asks for a non-prosecution, the police won't sue, right?
they had the audacity to command. How low could they possibly be? I continued to ignore them, but they persistently demanded not to sue and to ask for a lighter sentence. However, their demands suddenly stopped at one point. After giving orders every day, it was strange for them to suddenly cease. Curious, I decided to investigate. It turns out they had encountered a serious problem. The owner of the mansion whose wall was destroyed when Riley and Trevor crashed into it was furious and had demanded they pay for the repairs. The damage was extensive, so the cost of repairs was significant. Moreover, my husband had lied, saying,
"We were rushing to the hospital because Dad was suffering from an illness, and that led to the driving mistake."
However, the incident was reported in the news. Upon learning the truth, the mansion owner became even more enraged and insisted on receiving both the repair costs and compensation from the divorce trial. As a result, Riley and Trevor seemed to have bigger problems than just dealing with me.
"It wasn't on purpose. Please forgive us. We beg you."
Riley and Trevor were pleading, but the mansion owner was unforgiving. They were told they must pay no matter what. Since the mansion owner hired a lawyer, Riley and Trevor also had to hire one to handle the situation. Since I had a lawyer as well, the compensation for the divorce was smoothly negotiated between the lawyers. Given their clear wrongdoing, our demands were almost fully met. I also demanded and received the money Riley had misappropriated from our joint savings account. Although I hadn't noticed his gambling addiction, I remembered how his overtime had suddenly increased at one point. Probably, he was lying about working late and going to pachinko instead. And so, I naturally proceeded with the divorce from Riley. The negotiations were handled by our lawyers, and though initially reluctant, Riley agreed to the divorce when I firmly insisted. Riley's lawyer played a significant role by convincing them that they were in a very unfavorable position and needed to show sincerity. Later, I went to thank our neighbor Luella again.
"Thank you so much. I don't know how to express my gratitude."
Oh, I didn't do anything special. It's good that you're safe. Perhaps Emerson was looking out for you.
"Emerson, you say? What do you mean?"
After I was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, the firefighters came and checked the cause of the fire alarm. However, the only source of fire in the house was a candle on Emerson's altar, which no one should have lit. This wasn't enough to trigger the fire alarm, indicating a possible malfunction as there were no other signs of fire.
Maybe Emerson is always watching over you? She was so happy to have such a lovely daughter-in-law.
Luella told me with a smile. It might have been a coincidence, but even so, I felt a warmth thinking about Emerson's kind smile. After expressing my thanks to Luella again, I headed to a certain cake shop. This shop sells a chocolate cake that I've always loved. When I had promised to have tea time with Emerson, I wanted her to try the chocolate from this cake shop. After buying sweet buns, I went to the florist to buy flowers that matched Emerson's cheerful image, with a fresh impression, and headed to visit her grave. Offering the flowers and chocolate at the grave, I expressed my gratitude to Emerson.
Dear Emerson, thank you so much. Your help saved me. Though I've divorced Riley, I will always love you, Mom.
I wished I could have talked more with Emerson. I wanted to have that tea party.
This chocolate was meant to be shared with you, Emerson, during our tea time. It's really delicious.
Just then, the wind blew softly. Feeling as if Emerson had responded, a tear fell from my eye. But thinking that crying would worry Emerson, I lifted my face, smiled, and said,
I'll visit again, Emerson.
And moved on. I decided to take the chocolate back with me later, as I couldn't leave it at the grave. On the way home, I felt incredibly refreshed. Despite everything, I vowed to live energetically from tomorrow on. Returning to single life, I threw myself into work more than ever before. Riley and Trevor, with their complex fractures, seem to still be in the hospital. The owner of the mansion is trying to collect the repair costs before they are discharged and sent to prison, and it seems they had to sell their car and belongings to pay back the money using their savings. Physically and mentally devastated, and with prison time awaiting them. They are experiencing a living hell. I hope they reflect deeply and pay for their crimes once they are discharged and sent to prison. Since then, I've been visiting Emerson's grave regularly, updating her on my life. Having had enough of love for a while, I've decided to enjoy being single and am studying hard to earn new qualifications. I plan to live every day without regrets. My husband called me disgusting for my severe morning sickness, looking down on me with cold eyes.
You're the one who threw up and made a mess, right? Hurry up and open the window to air it out. If the smell sticks, you're paying for it. Just because you find it hard to go shopping or cook doesn't mean morning sickness isn't an illness. Don't be so stupid. On top of that, as my morning sickness got worse, my husband left me at home and went on an overseas trip with mother-in-law, Audrina. That was the last straw for me, and I began to plot my revenge. A week later, my husband called, furious. I laughed it off. Since you told me to clean the house, I did just as you said. Got a problem with that? I'm Kimberly, a 28-year-old office worker. My husband, Eamon, and I live in a detached house and both work while we've recently become pregnant. While I was happy, my morning sickness was so severe that I couldn't go to work on some days. Fortunately, many at my workplace were understanding. Once you get through this, it'll get easier, so make sure to rest and take care of yourself. They gave me some time off when I was considering quitting. So, I spent my days at home, resting as much as possible, eating when I could, and doing household chores. The problem was my husband. He practically stopped doing any housework at all. You're always at home, right? Even a pregnant woman can clean, so at least do that. While my husband used to do household chores when we were both working, he stopped doing anything since I took my leave. Even when I said I couldn't do it because of severe nausea, he wouldn't listen. Moreover, he compared me to other pregnant women he had seen, saying, "Just being lazy and slacking off in the name of morning sickness." Furthermore, he was extremely averse to me vomiting. The first time I vomited at home, I didn't make it to the toilet and ended up using the living room trash can. Seeing this, my husband, pinching his nose, hurried me to ventilate the room and kept yelling at me, even though my nausea hadn't subsided. Although I vomited into a plastic bag in the trash can, so the can itself wasn't dirty, he made me dispose of the bag and then threw the trash can away. Hey, what's with that attitude? Why are you telling me to open a window when I'm vomiting? You could open it yourself. And I properly sealed the double bag before throwing it away, so why throw out the trash can in front of me as if to make a point? Disgusting, smelly, don't talk. Even if it's in a plastic bag, droplets might have gotten on the trash can. After that, no matter what I said, don't talk because it's smelly. He wouldn't even listen. I started to consider divorce. Maybe once my morning sickness settled down and I could go back to work,
my husband would return to being the kind and helpful person he used to be. But could a husband who hurled such abuse at me while I was suffering return to how he was? Or was this his true nature? As I worried, my morning sickness only got worse. With nausea hitting me multiple times a day, I started carrying a plastic bag with me everywhere in the house to vomit without my husband seeing and dispose of it. However, one time, I didn't manage to dispose of it in time, and he saw me with the bag.
Don't touch anything, all right? You're paying for the sofa you just sat on since you're going to dispose of it because you dirted it.
He looked at me with utter disgust. When I impulsively brought up divorce, I noticed he was holding a pamphlet in his hand. He spread it out to show me.
In about 2 weeks, I'm going on a trip overseas with Mom. We plan to stay for about a week. Don't slack off on cleaning just because I'm not here. Keep the house clean. What? What are you thinking?
While looking at me coldly, my husband laughed in a low voice.
I don't want to stay in a house you've made filthy. The morning sickness should settle down in about 3 weeks, right? By the time I'm back from the trip, it should be nearly over, so clean the house in the meantime.
Fine.
I'll give the house a thorough cleaning.
The next 2 weeks were tough for me. He doubled down on doing nothing, even eating strongly scented meals or spraying harsh perfume around the room despite my pleas because it made me nauseous. Despite locking me in the bathroom, he'd bang on the door furiously and yell if he wanted to use it himself. This lifestyle continued. I immediately informed my parents that I had decided on divorce. Since my husband's attitude changed, I had been discussing it with my parents, who must have realized from my words that convincing me otherwise was no longer possible. They told me to come back home immediately. However, just divorcing and returning to my parents' home wasn't enough for me. I was determined to teach my husband, who lacked any awareness of being a father and thought nothing of the individual differences in pregnancy and morning sickness, a lesson. 2 weeks later, I saw my husband off with a large carry-on bag. These 2 weeks were the peak of my morning sickness, and I had lost more than 2 kilos. If it continued like this, I would end up hospitalized due to severe pregnancy sickness. Seeing me visibly thinner, my husband still called me dirty and, after repeatedly ordering me to clean the house, fled like he was escaping. I stayed at the entrance until he was out of sight, then took a deep breath and made a phone call. A week later, I was leisurely sitting in my parents' living room when calls from my husband kept coming in. Calls from my husband kept coming in one after another. After watching for a while, my parents started to panic, so I reluctantly answered.
Don't mess with me. What the hell is this? Explain.
I instinctively moved my smartphone away from my ear at the sound of my husband's loud voice the moment the call connected. Still, I sighed at the loud enough voice and listened to him.
I can't get into the house. What's going on? Don't change the locks on me while I'm away. Ah, the real estate agent changed them. It's kind of gross to have the same keys as the previous tenant for the next one, right? So, they changed the locks when selling the house. Huh? Real estate agent? Oh, didn't you see the sign? It's right there next to it, for sale.
There was silence on the phone for a while before the angry voice came again.
What are you doing on your own? Who gave you permission to sell it? Why are you selling it? You said the whole house smells. So, I cleaned the entire house, including that. And why would I need anyone's permission to sell my house? Your house. That's not right. That house belongs to your grandfather. It's a crime to sell it without being the title holder. That house was given to me, I remodeled it, and it's in my name. You can't just sell it if you're not the title holder.
Indeed, the house we lived in belonged to my grandfather. However, after my grandfather passed away, I, still single, remodeled it into its current form, and after getting married, my husband moved in to live together. My husband was momentarily speechless knowing the title was in my name, but quickly changed his approach.
That house is where I live too. You can't just kick out a resident like that. It's illegal to sell my stuff. Besides, it was our house since we lived there as a couple, so it's not just your house anymore. Unfortunately, that house was in my name before we got married. We never changed it to a joint title after marriage. Plus, I moved all the stuff out after, so your things are all safe. I did dispose of the sofa you said was smelly, though.
My husband seemed panicked by the mention of moving out his belongings. He was asking where and when.
It's at your grandmother's house. After all, you're away with Dad gone and no siblings. There was nowhere else to send it but your grandmother's when you went overseas with Audrina.
Hearing his belongings were at his kind grandmother's house seemed to calm my husband for a moment, but his voice quickly filled with anger again.
So, you're the kind of woman who sells the house and dumps the belongings while her husband is on a trip. I'm divorcing you. I'll sue for compensation in the divorce court because of this. It's a relief you're the one bringing up divorce. I don't want you to come to the house anymore, and I'll be heading there with my lawyer soon.
So, goodbye. I wonder if my husband truly believed he could win if he took it to court. I calmed my panicking parents while contacting a lawyer. A week later, when I went to what my husband calls his in-laws' house, Audrina slapped me before I even entered the door. I had expected it and deliberately received the slap.
Because of you, the house is a mess. A woman who can't even do housework because of a little morning sickness is useless. Pay the compensation in the divorce court and let's divorce.
As I was rubbing my stinging cheek, planning to retort to Audrina, she saw someone behind me and her face twisted.
I thought you showed no remorse, but to strike immediately upon meeting is something else.
Behind me was Carol, my husband's grandmother, looking furious.
Hello. I'm really sorry for sending the belongings over so suddenly the other day. That's all right. If it hadn't been for that, I wouldn't have noticed at all.
I had come to the in-laws' house, which was now the home of my husband's grandmother who had kindly accepted his belongings. When I sent my husband's belongings, I included a letter of apology detailing everything about our situation. As a result, the grandmother was furious with her grandson's husband for hurling terrible words at his wife suffering from morning sickness and leaving her to fend for herself. She was equally furious at Audrina for going on an overseas trip with him without admonishing such behavior. The grandmother, now 80 years old, is a gentle figure to her grandson but a disagreeable mother-in-law to Audrina. Since Audrina married into the family, her relationship with the grandmother, due to their clashing personalities, has always been like cats and dogs. Sure enough, Audrina, upon suddenly facing the grandmother, twisted her face in obvious annoyance, which only fueled the grandmother's anger further. After briefly addressing the shouting match between the two, I entered the house. There, my husband stood, dumbfounded next to the grandmother and Audrina. It might have been shocking for my husband to see his kind grandmother and mother arguing so fiercely. However, wanting to discuss matters with my husband without Audrina's interference, I had informed the grandmother of my visit in advance. And we started the divorce negotiation with my lawyer before Audrina could return. The process didn't take much time and ended smoothly. The compensation amount my husband had prepared for the divorce court and its basis were systematically dismantled by my lawyer, leaving him speechless. After a thorough division of assets and agreeing not to approach me except when visiting our child after its birth, my husband readily agreed, and our marriage ended abruptly. As I was leaving the house, the grandmother and Audrina were still standing next to each other. I addressed them briefly before departing, but they seemed too heated in their argument to pay me any mind. Subsequently, I began receiving a barrage of complaint-like emails from my ex-husband. Apparently, he became annoyed with the grandmother coming to the in-laws' house and meddling. Imagining my former husband and Audrina, who had shouted at me so boldly, becoming meek in front of a petite grandmother, finally brought me to laughter. However, the nature of my ex-husband's emails soon shifted towards seeking reconciliation.
Every day there's shouting.
They both ask me what I think when they're fighting, dragging me into it, and it's annoying. It's a lifetime request. Please, let me stay at your place. I'll do household chores or anything. I won't do anything terrible again, and I'll never say it. I want to meet our coming child too. I love you. I want to remarry you.
I responded mechanically. I will not reconcile. As for the child, you can meet if you pay child support.
And left it at that. Eventually, the messages from my ex-husband ceased. Apparently, unable to bear the living conditions, he left Audrina and went somewhere. Not providing any support, Audrina, not yet of pensionable age, is scraping by on her savings. Audrina herself contacted me with this news. No one's helping me. Please, I want to stay at your place. I only went on the trip with my son because he invited me. I had no idea you were suffering so much from morning sickness. She claimed, lining up convenient excuses over the phone, but when I threatened to report her to the police, the calls stopped. Apparently, the grandmother also refused to help, and Audrina, limited by her savings, began working part-time. Thus, she no longer had the energy to call or email me. However, the altercation between the grandmother and Audrina that day is well known throughout the neighborhood, and they saw me deliberately receiving Audrina's slap. Consequently, the neighbors have distanced themselves from Audrina, leaving her to live uncomfortably in her home. Seemingly unable to afford renting a new apartment, she spends her days diminishing in stature. Yet, living alone in a rent-free house should be manageable on a part-time income. My morning sickness has finally subsided, and I no longer vomit. The doctor, learning of my divorce and the circumstances around it, scolded me for accumulating too much stress, which wouldn't help in healing. Though I had been consulting with my family, the stress from living with an uncooperative ex-husband for a while, and dealing with real estate agents online to sell the house, had been too much on my body, and I reflected on this. Moving forward, I plan to avoid stress and return to work. Anyway, I'll be taking maternity leave before giving birth, planning to live at my parents' house. Now, imagining the appearance of my unborn child brings me immense joy. As the days go by, my anticipation grows, and I can hardly wait to see what kind of child will be born. No matter what, I intend to raise my child with love.
I did what you could never do for Yosef.
With those words, she showed off her newborn niece, Amelia, to me. Seeing me struggle for words, Yara wore a triumphant smile.
Doesn't she look adorable, just like Yara? I bet she'll be a model or an actress someday.
My betraying husband, Yosef, then added an insult to his remark.
Time to head home, I guess. We've been able to show our happiness to the single Kayla over here, so it's been quite a satisfying today.
Yosef exchanged a sly glance with Yara, both grinning deviously. What did they think of children? Were they just tools to flaunt in front of me, who couldn't have kids? Their attitude was pushing my anger to its limits. That's when I realized something. Wait, this child.
What is it? You're looking serious, all of a sudden.
Yosef responded, slightly caught off guard by my mutter. I couldn't help but find the situation amusing and began to chuckle. Gently stroking the baby's cheek, I replied,
Such an angel, but her skin.
As I revealed a certain truth, the smug looks on their faces froze instantly. My name is Kayla, 52 years old. My husband, Yosef, is an executive at a major trading company, whom I've supported as a housewife for many years. Yosef occasionally brings colleagues over to enjoy my cooking. Most of what comes out of Yosef's mouth are boasts about his younger days. His colleagues, brought along, would force a smile and endure his long stories, saying, "That's amazing." When they praise my cooking as delicious, Yosef smirks unpleasantly and says, "Well, that's about the only talent she has."
She's eating off my high salary, so she better do at least this much, or she's just useless. And so he said, belittling me in front of his subordinates. I'd be lying if I said it didn't bother me, but I always reminded myself that I wasn't in a position to argue. It's been almost 30 years since we got married, but we've never had children. I always dreamed of having at least 2 kids after marriage. Despite spending time and money on fertility treatments, we were never blessed with children. I felt a sense of guilt for not being able to bear children. So, no matter how heartless Yosef's words were, I'd smile and think, I can endure this much. When Yosef talks about work, his eyes shine like a boy's, and I was happy to support him in any way I could. After all, I'm in love with Yosef. Apart from cooking, I had another talent. It was sewing, a hobby since my student days. I started making hand-sewn dolls, imitating my mother. They became quite popular among my friends. I used this skill to help with the household finances, making stuffed animals and charms. It might not be much compared to my husband's high salary. But I kept continuing with this small side job, hoping to at least treat Yosef to some nice meals. Our apartment becomes a weekend retreat for my niece Yara. Yara, my sister Megan's daughter, works in admin at a small trading company. She had a reason for her frequent visits. And that was to support a budding idol group.
Did you see Trevor on TV the other day? He looked so cool.
Yara arrived, fanning herself with a paper fan bearing a young man's face. Trevor, the man on the fan, is the leader of that idol group. They perform regularly at a club near our apartment every weekend, which is why Yara often stays over.
Yara, your collection seems to have grown again, hasn't it?
Each time Yara visited, her belongings in our room increased.
I mean, come on. When new merchandise comes out, I just have to have it. Plus, Trevor is the most popular, so it sells out right away.
I couldn't help but smile wryly at my niece's excitement before a performance. I understand the joy of buying your favorite idol's merchandise. I used to collect records of my favorite singers. But I wondered why she felt the need to bring all her new purchases to our house.
Isn't it hard to carry all that around? It's fine. I'll just store my stuff here.
Yara nonchalantly placed her bags in the corner of our bedroom.
It's just me and my husband, so we don't have much space, you know.
Ah, come on. It's fine. Uncle just comes home to sleep, right? Resigned, I had no choice but to accept my niece's whims. Oh, and I almost forgot. Mom made me bring this. With that, Yara pulled out a set of premium tea from her bag. My sister Megan and her husband occasionally sent gifts, and always made sure Yara brought something with her whenever she stayed over.
Oh my, they didn't need to.
After graduating high school, Megan worked far away until she was 30, then took over the family's variety store and married Kevin, an employee there. Since a large shopping center opened nearby, their business has suffered. So I always told her there's no need for such gifts. I'm sorry Yara's been such a bother. Megan would apologize over the phone, sounding guilty. However, Yara herself has become hard to ignore lately. She began entering our house even when we weren't home. It turns out Yosef has given her a spare key. She's here every week, might as well have one. Yosef had a soft spot for her.
Uncle, you're the best.
Yara would hug Yosef's arm, and he'd smile proudly.
All right then.
At first, I tried to be accommodating. But, 3 months later, a cash-filled envelope I kept in my bedroom drawer was missing.
When I asked Yara, she nonchalantly replied, "Sorry, Aunt Kayla. I borrowed it. I really wanted Trevor's new merchandise."
She looked at me with pleading eyes, but Yara has a job. She should be making enough to get by.
Wouldn't buying it with your own money bring you more joy?
Of course, I want to. But my salary isn't enough. Her casual words weighed on me. How much is she spending on this obsession? But it wasn't just about money. I noticed my skincare products were running out unusually fast. Since Yosef never used them, it had to be Yara.
Confronted, she admitted it without hesitation. Sorry, Aunt Kayla. I just thought I'd use them since they were there. What did she mean since they were there? That cream was expensive. I frowned, and Yara pretended to shiver and rub her arms. Aunt Kayla, you're scary. Then Yosef would join in and laugh beside Yara. Come on, it's not a big deal.
Don't laugh, you should be scolding her.
Don't get mad. You look older when you frown like that. Yosef, usually not much of a joker, becomes chatty around Yara. I found particularly displeasing.
Anyway, I don't want you using our things without permission. You have a job, so buy your own stuff. If you continue using mine, I won't let you stay over again. I'll make sure your mom knows that too.
When I lectured Yara, Yosef turned red and shouted.
Enough already. The things you use aren't even earned by you, are they? I'm the one who's worked for all of it. I'm not living in luxury. I've been cutting corners, managing with what we have. I'm not splurging on hobbies like Yara. It's my money, I earned it. If I say Yara can use it, then she can use it however she wants.
Yosef's yelling made me want to cry. True, most of our income was from Yosef's work, so I couldn't argue further. Feeling abandoned with Yosef not on my side, I almost called Megan but stopped and put my phone away. Megan and her husband must be preoccupied with their struggling store. Complaining about my husband would just cause them unnecessary worry. Marital issues should be resolved between us. Days passed as I kept my concerns to myself. It was one cold Sunday morning during winter. A friend from my student days invited me out, so I decided to wear a fur coat I had never worn since purchase. I told Yosef about it beforehand.
I plan to be back by evening, but if I'm late, could you start dinner? Just reheat yesterday's leftovers in the microwave.
Don't worry about me. Take your time and enjoy yourself, he said, so smiling as he saw me off. Yosef, who usually belittles me in front of his subordinates, was kind and considerate when it was just us. I felt genuinely happy to be married to him. But as I arrived at the station, my friend called to cancel. Sorry. My husband's thrown out his back and can't move. I hate to do this, but can we reschedule? That's okay. Next time, you're treating me to fancy French cuisine. After jokingly dismissing my friend's repeated apologies over the phone, I wondered what to do, trying to come up with a plan for the day, but nothing particular came to mind. There's nothing else to do, I guess I'll go back home to Yosef. I stopped at the supermarket to pick up ingredients for lunch, thinking of making a warm stew for Yosef. As I opened the door, I was hit by a wave of heat and a scent of strong perfume. I noticed Yara's coat, a common sight on weekends.
Yara, are you here?
No answer. No one was in the living room. Strange, where could they be? I could sense someone was home, so they hadn't gone out. I stored the groceries and decided to look around the apartment. I could hear Yosef snoring from the bedroom. Was he taking a nap this early? I didn't understand much about Yosef's job, but being an executive must be tough during the week. So, I thought to let him rest on his rare day off. When I opened the bedroom door to see Yosef, I was met with a shocking sight. On our bed, usually shared by Yosef and me, lay Yosef and Yara, both naked and asleep. They were unaware of my return, lost in deep slumber. Yosef. I called out in a faint voice. More than anger, I felt a profound disappointment in my husband. After calling a few times, Yosef finally opened his heavy eyelids.
Kayla? You're back early.
He seemed groggy and closed his eyes again.
Yara, I'm home.
Yara, stretching and slowly sitting up, noticed me and shook Yosef to wake him up.
Uncle, wake up. We got caught.
She spoke with a mischievous grin, like a child found while playing hide and seek. Yosef sat up lazily, sighing, so, we're caught, huh, and yawned nonchalantly.
What's the meaning of this?
Confronted with this betrayal, I even forgot to express my anger. Well, as you see, we're involved, that's all. Both of you, get dressed right now. Surprisingly calm, I instructed the two. 2 hours later, my husband's parents and Megan's family arrived at my request. Sorry, Megan, Kevin, to bother you at this busy time. Don't worry about us. This is a serious matter. Megan comforted me, casting a cold glare at Yosef and Yara. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself. She scolded at Yara, who only sighed and avoided eye contact. And to my surprise, she was checking the latest idol group updates on her phone. This is not the time for that. Megan scolded, snatching the phone away. Yara just clicked her tongue. Kayla, I'm so sorry for what our foolish son has done. Emily, my mother-in-law, tearfully apologized. Both in-laws were over 80, and it must have been hard for them to come in this cold. Do we really need to drag these old folks into this? Yosef complained. John, my father-in-law, slammed the table. Do you have no sense of responsibility? Yosef, after such a terrible betrayal to Kayla. You're unbelievable, Emily said in dismay. Yosef, how could this happen? Can you give me a satisfying explanation? No need to explain. Any man would prefer a young and cute girl like Yara over an old lady like her, right? As a man, I'm ashamed of you. John shouted at Yosef, who showed no remorse, his face turning red with anger. Yara is no better. How could you hurt Kayla, who's always been so kind to you? Where did we go wrong? Kevin, usually quiet, sighed in dismay. It wasn't Aunt Kayla who took care of me, it was Uncle Yosef. He buys me whatever I want. He even lets me use all the cosmetics and bags in this house. So different from Aunt Kayla, who's so petty. Yara, apologize to Kayla. No way. Why should I apologize to her? I don't need an apology. Even if you did, it wouldn't repair my relationship with Yosef. I spoke calmly. I reflected on the 30 years I had devoted to Yosef, enduring his belittling behavior because I believed he loved me. But his betrayal shattered everything I had held dear. Let's get a divorce. There's no other option. Is that what you want, Kayla? Megan asked, and I nodded firmly. Thanks, Kayla. Now we can marry openly, Yosef said, hugging Yara. They gazed at each other, unconcerned about the family's presence. On the way here, Dad and I decided, if you showed no remorse, we would disown you today. Megan said to Yara, her voice tinged with anger and sadness. That's fine. I don't need you guys anymore. I have Uncle Yosef now. Then it's decided. Don't ever cross our doorstep again, Kevin declared firmly. Yosef, we too have decided to disown you today. Megan's family and my in-laws apologized to me before leaving in a somber mood. Afterward, my divorce from Yosef was finalized. The divorce mediation, handled by lawyers, granted me compensation from both Yosef and Yara. Yosef, not wanting to burden Yara, paid both their shares in full. Within a month of our divorce, Yosef remarried Yara. I'm an executive at a major trading company. I can afford it. You can have all the marital assets, Yosef boasted, relinquishing his shared property. Despite his pride, he seemed to be struggling financially after paying both settlements. But he was a stranger to me now, so I focused on moving forward. I returned to my family home and began helping at Megan's variety store. Both my elderly parents were in a care facility. I took over the shop when Megan and her husband visited them. Sorry for always making you help out. It's me who should be grateful. I can't expect to be fed without doing anything. Megan and her husband always looked out for me after what I had gone through. Mostly out of concern for the mistake their daughter had made. Their feelings were so apparent that I felt more apologetic than they did. That summer, 3 years after I had returned home, Yosef and Yara unexpectedly appeared before me. Why are you here? I was stunned to see them smiling as they entered the shop. "It's been a while, Aunt Kayla," Yara greeted, holding a newborn baby in her arms. Seeing the baby, I was at a loss for words. Since Yara was holding the child, it must be her baby. That would mean the father is, of course, Yosef. Seeing my speechlessness, Yara wore a triumphant smile.
"I did what you could never do for Yosef,"
she said, playing with the baby. She now called Yosef by his name, not uncle anymore. That reality shook me deeply. Then Megan and her husband returned.
"What are you doing here after all this time? Is that how you greet your daughter who's just returned home after 3 years?"
Yara retorted, showing off the baby.
Look, Mom. Our child, Amelia. She's your first grandchild.
"Indeed. Congratulations,"
Megan replied emotionlessly, avoiding her daughter's gaze. Yara turned to me, smiling.
"I came to announce the birth of my daughter. Celebrate with us, Aunt Kayla. Say hello to Amelia." "Enough. What on earth are you thinking? Have you considered Kayla's feelings?"
Kevin raised his voice, uncharacteristically angry.
"Doesn't she look adorable, just like Yara? I bet she'll be a model or an actress someday."
Yosef said lazily. Megan, unable to bear it, grabbed a broom to chase them away.
"Leave now. This isn't your place. You're disrupting our business, so go away."
"Time to leave.
We've boasted enough happiness to the lonely, single Kayla. It's a quite satisfying day today," Yosef said, exchanging a conniving smile with Yara. What did they think of children? Using a child as a tool to flaunt and bask in their superiority? As I sadly watched the baby in Yara's arms, I realized something. Wait, this child.
"What is it? You're looking serious, all of a sudden,"
Yosef asked, puzzled. I suddenly found the situation amusing and started to chuckle.
"What's with the sudden laughter? Something wrong?"
"Looks like Aunt Kayla's gone crazy from the shock."
Gently stroking the baby's cheek, I replied.
"Like an angel, but her skin.
"Her skin? What about it?"
It looks so healthy. A beautiful tan, unlike Yosef's fair skin."
Indeed, the baby's skin was a stark contrast to Yosef's paleness. What's wrong with that?
"None of my family or relatives have such tan skin."
Is that strange?
"There are people in the world with tan skin." "Oh, Yara once mentioned her great-grandfather was tan." "That's genetics, right?"
Yosef said, acting knowledgeable. At that moment, my suspicions about Yara turned into certainty.
"That's impossible."
"What do you mean, impossible?"
Yosef questioned, suddenly anxious. I fetched an old family album from a closet in the room my grandparents used to use.
"Here, something I want you to see."
Saying this, I showed a photo from the album.
"It's just a regular family photo."
In the photo were me, Megan, our parents, and grandparents. It was taken in front of the store when my parents first started their variety store.
"This tall man on the right is my grandfather, Yara's great-grandfather."
So?
It's just a normal family photo. Don't you see? Look at my grandfather's skin.
Fair-skinned, so what?
That's normal, right?
Yosef seemed to not grasp the reality. While he was confused, Yara's face turned pale. Enough.
Amelia needs her milk.
Let's go. Yara urged, tugging at Yosef's shirt. Unaware of the truth, Yosef started to leave, so I gave him another hint.
There's no one with tan skin in my family, not just my grandfather.
No relatives either.
Wait, does that mean?
Finally, Yosef seemed to understand what I was implying. That means the likelihood of you two having a tan child is 0. I said emphatically. Yosef started shaking. It's a waste of time being here. Let's go home. Yara hurried him, but Yosef, now understanding, didn't move. He turned to Yara, questioning her sternly.
What's this about? Our child shouldn't be tan. Then whose child is this?
There's something else I want you to see. I snatched Trevor's keychain from Yara's bag and showed it to Yosef. Trevor, known for being half Hispanic and half American, publicly acknowledged his mixed heritage. Yara had always admired Trevor's mixed heritage, often praising his appearance as cool.
This guy. He has the same skin color as Amelia.
Yara, initially frightened, quickly turned defiant and laughed.
Oops, looks like I got caught. That's right. Amelia isn't your child. She's mine and Trevor's. I seduced him, and he fell for me immediately.
Yara boastfully recounted her affair with Trevor.
You've been deceiving me?
Seriously, did you think a young and cute girl like me would be into an old guy like you? Hilarious. I approached you because you're an executive and seemed wealthy. With your money, I could buy lots of Trevor's merch and win him over.
So, I was just an ATM to you.
Yosef realized the truth and erupted in anger. Of course. I endured it for the money. Who would willingly share a bed with an old man like you? I let you live in a dream for 3 years. You should thank me.
What did you say?
Megan, my husband, and I were stunned as Yara and Yosef argued.
Enough, both of you. The baby is crying. Can't you hear her?
Megan shouted, stopping their quarrel.
I can't stand this anymore. You're not family, just strangers. Leave now.
Megan ushered Yara and Yosef out. Poor Amelia. That was my honest thought. 2 months later, Yosef visited me alone. Suddenly bowing deeply, he shamelessly begged, "Please, Kayla, give me another chance. I did a DNA test. There's no blood relation between me and Amelia." I was deceived.
Oh, really?
And?
I couldn't forgive Yara and Trevor for conspiring to make me raise their child. I stormed into Trevor's dressing room at a concert and demanded compensation.
Oh my. How challenging for you. I humored him, though I was indifferent. I had already learned about the scandal from the TV and magazines. Trevor impregnated a married fan and let the husband raise the child as his own. This scandal became widely known, bringing national attention to the obscure idol group. Facing nationwide criticism, Trevor's agency couldn't defend him and ended his contract, as reported by tabloid TV.
I saw it on TV. They're responsible for their actions. Right? They're terrible.
Yosef laughed, thinking I was agreeing with him. Moreover, the tabloids, not easing their investigative efforts, ruthlessly delved into the life of Trevor's partner, Yara. Astonishingly, it was revealed that Yara had been physically involved with multiple men besides Trevor, earning money from them. Apparently, her goal was to financially support Trevor. You see? I'm just another victim deceived by them. So please, let's start over again. I decline. As Yosef tearfully begged, I replied emotionlessly. I called Kevin from the back of the store to escort Yosef out.
If you keep bothering Kayla, we'll call the police.
Kevin's firm warning sent Yosef away, dejected. A month passed. Though the media frenzy had subsided, reports about Trevor and Yara continued. Trevor, ousted from the group, was reportedly exploiting Yara for money. Yara started working at a nightclub to make ends meet. Raising a child was proving difficult for Yara and her strained finances. In the end, feeling sorry for Amelia, Megan and her husband decided to take her in and raise her.
There's been a lot, but she's still our granddaughter.
That's right. The child is innocent. The couple cared for Amelia while managing their store. As for me, I left home to fulfill my dream of opening a sewing class. I couldn't just keep relying on Megan and her husband forever. Megan told me I could stay as long as I wanted, but when I mentioned that I had things I wanted to do, she happily encouraged me to pursue them. Amelia's first birthday was approaching. What should I gift her? Partially to see Amelia and partially to visit Megan and her husband,
I still occasionally stop by the family store.